Our journey begins day 12, June 12, 2024, envisioning principles of a movement. So this is going to be a lot of picking up from yesterday's work, and we're going to be going over some of the objectives, which are basically these pinkish gradients that we were talking through. So I really want to figure out individual desires, goals, efforts, yet somehow working together in a self-organized system, which is somewhat what we have now, but I don't think, I mean, if we had that now truly, we would have solved all the efforts. So what exactly would be the primary goals? And if they are truly shared in a combination of everyone's goals, then why am I assuming that I could even try to come up with them myself? And I guess it's because I imagine that I would have the ability to come up with commonly held goals, although I do think, at least maybe just to start with, but then they would morph. But then the issue is I don't want to start something that can morph into something really terrible. So you need to have some sort of overriding goals that people are okay with when they initially join on, I think. Um, would this only truly work if you had the ability to create your own physical locations? So we'll get into that. And if not, what else could you really do? And it seems very similar to religion, where you can have a church in a city, and the people that are in the city that belong to the church group go to that church, and they kind of have their own little club. So, but that still is like a physical location. But like you don't have to have people who only believe in that church thing have their own little community and have where their church and nothing else. There's nothing else there. I do think diversity is important, and it's important that it not rely on location because otherwise you'd have to have more of the revolution sort of thing. And then how would leadership be held and how would that work? Wouldn't you get a separation, especially if separate location? And this is like a separation of people groups. So let's just start off the top. Individual desires, goals, and efforts, yet somehow working together in a self-organized system. I believe we also talked about this. Originally, the concern was laid out in day 10. Um, Maybe even day 9. Yeah, lack of freedom. Yeah, at least there. And then we talk about it. And then, yeah, here. So that was also day 10. And then we talked about it here, day 11, talking about individual contributions, diverse skill sets, autonomy to work on what they want to work on. But somehow that's melded with the overall goals. So maybe we need to think through what are the overall goals, which I am not sure we have that entirely laid out. So the movement goals. Okay, let's come up with something here. The movement goals. And this is going to be, is it possible for a person like me to know? And I think the answer to that is probably maybe get 90% of the way there through commonly held goals, but I do think you'd have who decides who decides when are these decided? And what are the how do they evolve? How do you prevent evolution to destruction? Because that's why, like, the Constitution is good, because it's not changing. And so you can't have a group of people at one period of time who just want to change everything, and then it really screws things up. But I do think you could have an evolutionary system if you had it govern the process by which the goals are decided. If this process is also self-organizing towards the best possible outcome, then the evolution to destruction should be solved. If that makes sense, basically the idea is that when they go to change the goals, the main goals of the movement, for some reason or another, then all you'd have to do is do that in a way that is that always the outcome of that will always be better goals than the ones that you had before. Now, how would you do that? I'm thinking you could do that with the help of AI and basically future reading, like being able to statistically process how decisions will affect future, some sort of democracy, some sort of, I don't want to put a delay of time, some sort of checks and balances. And those are just like ideas. Okay, who decides? I think it should be everyone. Everyone who's a part. Initially, everyone who is a part. So just me for now, unless anyone else wants to join. Is it possible for one person like me to know? Yeah, that's why, like, this ties to that. Okay. And then how would everyone decide? Oh, I guess that's another aspect. That's very similar to evolve. How would they be decided? How would they evolve? So, the self-organizing process. So what would that mean? Some sort of tokenomics, which I've heard of recently, but it's not, maybe it's not the right, maybe it's not a word yet. But basically the idea of like blockchain like single identity way of essentially voting. But then voting, some sort of like weighed like if AI can extract common goals and values, then those common goals and values, we can propose law changes, or not self-rule changes. I don't even know if I want to call them rules, but and then it's some sort of run this through the future statistical analysis, and then that's kind of the general self-organizing principle. Now, in the beginning, I need to make in the beginning. Wait a minute. In the beginning, we would have some sort of self-organizing democratic which would mean it would be tested against future probabilities. I'm almost wondering if you'd have to have a little bit more leadership in the beginning. Okay. Okay, that's how you decide the goals. Now, what are my initial goals? Or not my initial goals, but what are the potential so you kind of have oh, interesting. You have self-organizing principles, which that pulls over from all of this sort of stuff, which maybe I can just group that together. No. There's a container somewhere. I can move these into here. Self-organizing principles. Okay. Does that work, by the way? Nice. So those are kind of the initial goals. But then you have like vision of how movement should be born, built, grow, or like maybe evolve is a little better. Well, grow is good too. A little bit different idea. Grow, evolve. Change. And you kind of have vision of how. Vision of movement. End state. That would be mostly everything. Of course, you'd have the self-organizing principles. But yeah, basically, again, the idea of the movement is the force by which things actually change. Moving people trying to make a difference. It goes all other ideas of how to make the world a better place. Movement spreads things. Things change. I think I also had self-organizing principles of people becoming the best versions of themselves and working together in coordination. So, and that's going to be, that's going to be kind of in here in the self-organizing principles of how because obviously that's going to be, not everyone agrees with that. So let's, vision of how the movement should be born, built, evolve. That's a tough one. Let's say end state. Let's kind of explore this a little bit. So I don't know if I want to start putting in labels that we've used in the past and more just describe it. So I'm going to say the best possible future that most people agree with and philosophy points to as being the most likely best future. And any other thing, there's no reason to think it's not the best possible future. You could also say slightly better than yesterday type of thinking. Because it's really hard to know what is the actual ultimate best future, but at any given time is the one that most people agree with. Okay. Which, yeah, that gives me thinking on this one. At any given time is the best possible way of coordinating and allowing for individual freedom and such working toward a better way of progressing that most people agree with. There are no philosophical or other reasons not to think the way in which progress is being made is not the most ideal. I think there's a double negative in there, so I think I got this right. But if I did not, I just have a biological brain, and it is not a computer, doesn't always get things right perfectly. I mean, that goes for all of this stuff. Okay. And this is super, how would you verify that? I think verify best at any given moment. Is that even possible? So I think you'd have to have AI to verify. I think you'd also have to have that whole, probably have to have, okay, let's just make a list here. AI to verify. Leadership agrees. Philosophy agrees. The democratic voting also agrees. There you have a lot of diversity within the organization, which ensures that people do not think monoculturally. I don't know if that's a word. I hope that's not like a bad word with a bad connotation, but basically you don't want to think monoculturally. You'd want to have a bunch of cultures, a bunch of different types of people from all backgrounds, all that stuff, to make sure that what you're thinking benefits is going to be the best possible future for everyone involved. Now, what at the beginning, let's start with that, because otherwise, and that whole thing, this whole thing was supposed to be at the beginning, but we'll just say at the beginning, how would you ensure that it's constantly doing all those things? Born, okay, born slowly, initially, with people passionate about making the world a better place in the best way, willing to think, and who are generally, you'd have to be a person that is working on and becoming the best version of themselves. If you don't have people that are working towards becoming the best version of themselves, how would you know that they were actually desiring the right things? How do you know their desires aren't just whatever society or some person they heard from said something? Whereas if you're individually like, I want the best world for myself and for everyone else, and I want to be selfless about that, so I want to think about it for everyone else and then myself, then you're more likely to actually make a decent decision. So I don't know how you would verify this. This whole verification process, because is it going to have to be a little bit exclusive, especially at the beginning? Or can everything just be transparent? So even if you have someone that isn't working towards becoming the best version of themselves and is just doing something out of whatever reason, then you'd still be okay because everything is transparent and you can tell what the person actually, what their actual goals are. And so you could weight that in a system. I think it'd have to be a little bit exclusive at the beginning, but I'm gonna have to think about that more. Okay. Is there any way to verify this? I think potentially with AI, like a test. Although I don't know that you can ever verify something like that. Actions, track record. Like if you said, oh, they have to have been going to the gym for 6 months and reading lots of books. Well, then, like, would I pass the test? Like, did I read the right kind of books? Like, you'd be like, but I actually like the world a better place. But I think people would understand because, like, you can't just have any old person who doesn't have the best intentions join and screw everything up, especially at this volatile beginning stage. Okay, I kind of want to. I think we got decently far, but I kind of want to make sure I have all my red boxes correct. So I need to think more about how it is built, evolves, built. I think built, grow, evolve, change, and that's so these can be red. Then need to detail this out. Okay. So what is this? Kind of mapping out this, which I have done a lot of thinking on, so that should be possible to do. All right, that's kind of decent red boxes. Now, those were kind of the somewhat objectives and who's deciding. But I still wonder how you would allow for freedom. This question has been plaguing me. I feel like just answering that now. So let's bring this down here. We have individuality. Big question here. So I'll make that bigger. There we go. Like, there's individuality now, except it's kind of a little bit false. Everyone kind of follows societal norms. They also just follow societal norms. Would that be what they would do? So would they just follow the norms of the movement? Would there be parts of their life that... I'm getting worse at making these. Okay. How? So would they just follow the norms of the movement? What kind of freedom, individuality are we really talking about? Probably similar to current Bill of Rights. So, speech, religion, etc. Yeah. This is kind of the way that the democratic systems in republics like the United States are set up, so that you have rights. So maybe you would set that up similarly in the movement. Like, you can have rights to do whatever you want to do, but then you have to follow the rules if you want to be a part of it. Which seems like a subpar way of doing it. It would be cooler to me if everyone self-organized towards developing the best rules. You didn't really have to have rules per se. You just had people naturally doing the best thing that they can do. But I'm trying to figure out, how would a person even answer this question? Because, yeah, you could have individual rights, self-organizing. Maybe the self-organizing itself itself takes into account individual abilities, desires, goals, ways of life, ways of doing things, and organization just helps people to live their own best life, but do so in a way that allows for the best coordination possible. how would you do that? I better change this back. You'd have to have an AI system of management. Have to have common vision, goals that people, that everyone is okay with. General rules to follow by. Starting to kind of make sense though. Right. I mean, this is somewhat of an answer. If the self-organizing system itself accounted for every individual being the best version of themselves and allows each person to have maximal amount of freedom, then the self-organizing system primarily just allows for those efforts to be coordinated and to actually help the overall system. So the main difficulty then would be creating an organizational system in which every person's efforts do drastically help. Like essentially, it's sort of like an open source project where you pick the part that you're interested in and you work on that part. Except in individuality, in a self-organizing individuality organization, every person kind of figures out what they actually want to do. And then you start wondering, well, how much different is that from what we currently have? Because we currently have just a world where, like, yeah, like you go to college, you learn some things, you're trying to figure out how you can make a difference in the world, and then you join a company or you try to make this or that change, you volunteer, you donate to this or that, you contribute to different things, and that's supposed to be, a lot of the times, it's organizations, where your effort towards the organization, whichever part of the effort that you're interested in, helps the organization to move on. Yeah, it's sort of like you go to college to go to a major that you want to work in. Then you go find a company and you contribute your part into the self-organizing system. Although most businesses are not self-organizing. So that does make sense. I'm glad that it's similar to what we already have, but I wonder if it's any different. And I think no, that makes sense. I'm just wondering if you'd have to have some limitations, because I would say probably for people, for like the extremes of people trying to do harm and whatnot. But yeah, that's basically all it is you create a self-organizing system that can funnel everyone's efforts and coordinate them. The big aspect is the coordination piece. So maybe that will be a question for next time. How to build a self-organizing system that has extreme coordination. As long as everything's coordinated properly, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Your efforts can still make a difference. Okay, that makes sense. Would you need your own physical locations? Okay, let's bring that down here. I think it would potentially help, but I think this would be down the road, not a requirement. This would be kind of part of the whole self-organizing thing. That's funny. Okay. The self-organizing system can account for whenever, however, wherever you are inputting efforts. In which case, physical location would not be necessary. But it goes back to like the benefits that you can get would be a lot of the things that would be a result of, unless benefits of being part of the system, part of the self-organizing, can be distributed, maintained also whenever, wherever, however you contribute. So then you wouldn't have to have people living in their own communities to reap the benefits. So like, let's see if we can think of an example. If you had, let's say you wanted to not have to work anymore and dedicate all time to the movement. In order for that to happen, you'd have to be financially stable. Financially stable in order to do this. So how would you, like if you lived in a community where finances were not a thing, then you wouldn't have to worry about this. But if you still lived in a world governed by typical financial structures, then you could be paid you could set up small physical communities. I'm just putting that there because even though we're trying to figure out how not to do that, it does make a lot of sense to do that. And yeah, you could be paid through self-organizing system. Meaning meaning not with money, but with what the organization has by default of everyone's contributions. Now, that raises the question of how would you measure and pay people? Based on effort, results, etc. Oh, well, I guess the self-organizing system can account for all efforts being made into the system and use them all wisely. This might not be a huge deal, although I do think some contributions would be worth more because of difficulty, difficulty, stuff like that. Okay. Okay, that actually kind of makes sense. You wouldn't have to have your own physical location if the benefits of being part of the system organizing organization can be distributed and maintained also whenever, wherever, however you contribute. So what were the benefits? Belonging, purpose, that could be distributed. People that are bored, living a fulfilling life, being around kind people. You could be around kind people even if you weren't in your only around kind people. If you were around a lot of kind people, and if one of the benefits was that you could exchange in the self-organizing system of currency, that is going to be the big question. What is the currency? What is the that could still be useful in the regular market? Okay. Well, I'm really happy with how we got. How would leadership be held? I'm almost going to resort to that for that question. Separation of people groups. Probably. somewhat by default, just the way self-organizing, just the way like you're part of the self-organizing system or you're not. However, I think it depends how polar opposite things are and how strict it is to be a part of the movement. Like, if no one really cares if you're not part of the movement, they're just like, oh, he's not part of the movement yet, then it might not be that big of a deal. But I guess we'll think about that some more. Okay. So, a quick summary of day 12, June 12th, 2024, Envisioning Principles of the Movement. We went over some objectives and kind of getting into what would be the goals of the movement, kind of figuring out basically, is it possible for me to figure out the goals initially since not everyone's involved and we can't do the AI way of figuring out what the main goals would be. So then I'd be like, well, I can probably get 90% of the way there. And so we were kind of mapping out some of the initial goals, which would be how would we envision the movement being born, built, evolving, and how would we envision the end state of the movement? And it would basically be the best possible future that at any given time is what people would say is the best possible future. And it depends how you look at that. And then you have the vision of how the movement can be born, and we kind of get to at any given time, that's the best possible way that people would agree the movement can be born. And then you have at the beginning, we have some questions to answer tomorrow. And then we have, how would you maintain individuality? And we kind of understand if the self-organizing system can allow for every person's individuality while maintaining coordination. So we're going to have to figure out how to maintain coordination. And then we also figured out that you wouldn't necessarily need physical locations as long as you had a currency which could be used in the regular world, like outside of the movement. So, all right, thank you so much.